Daniel chapter 4, page 888. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods is in him. I said, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it, the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From every creature was fed. In the visions I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest people. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me, but you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, "Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." Belteshazzar answered, "My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to the distant parts of the earth. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven and saying, 'Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump, bound with iron and bronze, in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him.' This is the interpretation, Your Majesty, and this is the decree the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, Your Majesty, Be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be, then, your prosperity will continue. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, "Is not this the great Babylon I've built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes." Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble.
Welcome if you're at home. Lovely having you with us. We're continuing in our series in Daniel chapter 4. So grab a Bible if there's one near you. We're on page 888, Daniel chapter 4. As you're finding that, let me tell you about a friend of mine. They were an extra in a film in central London. Actually, they were picked up from central London. This is back in 2008, 2009. They got on a bus, a coach. They were taken to a secret location, some sort of English manor house with a chapel on the grounds, and they were dressed up in oldie-worldy type villager costume. And she was sat in this chapel hearing this preacher preach passionately about Nebuchadnezzar and how the Lord turned him into a beast, and then he proceeded to eat and devour people in his kingdom. And it won't surprise you, this film was about a werewolf. It was called The Wolf Man. Here is the picture. Anthony Hopkins was in it, Emily Blunt. But my friend was Australian. She was quite forthright. And so she said, I won't do her accent because it'll turn into a Welsh accent. But she said, can I speak to someone, please? And she got one of the runners, and she was engaging with the runner and said, no, I really need to speak to someone. And she told them the complaint that is not what the Bible teaches. Eventually, she was taken to the director. She was talking to the director. And she said, this is not what the Bible teaches. She said, can you prove it? And she'd hidden in her costume her Bible, because she thought, I'm going to be bored, I'm going to be sat there all day. She wasn't meant to have anything on her, but she pulled out this Bible from her sleeve, got it open, and revealed that Nebuchadnezzar did not turn into a beast that ate people. Okay, in the story we had read today, Nebuchadnezzar did go through some difficult times. Now, if you've been with us the past few weeks, don't know if Ralph mentioned this at the start, I've been affectionately calling Nebuchadnezzar Nezzar. And Nezzar is the king of one of the most powerful kingdoms the world has seen. He is the architect, or under his rule, they created one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Daniel and his pals were exiled from Jerusalem because of Nebuchadnezzar's powerful army. And this man who is at the center of so much power, becomes so mentally compromised that he thinks he is a cow in a field for anything between 7 seasons and 7 years. It is an astonishing moment, but it is there to teach us the main theme of this book. Now, if you haven't been around the past few weeks, you can catch up online. Daniel is an absolute ripper of the story. You can catch up with the sermons on YouTube. But we've called this series Making Home in Babylon. How do you make home in Babylon without becoming a Babylonian? How, for us, do you live as an exile and stranger in the world without being assimilated into the values and priorities of the world? And I think the big theme really is you'll only do that if you understand who it is who rules, who it is who's the one who can actually rescue, who is the true judge, who is the king whose kingdom will actually endure forever. And there's 3 main bits in chapter 4 today. There's a dream, there's an interpretation, and there is a fulfillment. And let's have a look. Let's dig in. Have a look at verse 4. We meet Nebuchadnezzar. And how are things going for Nebuchadnezzar at this point? Have a look at verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. So for Nebuchadnezzar, home life is contented and prosperous. The kids are doing all right. His multiple wives probably in his home. I mean, let's not go into his home life, but he's happy. And the palace is going all right. The palace is contented and prosperous. You know, systems in work are working well. The team are working well together. The nation is pretty happy. He's doing well. Life is good. Now, I wonder if you can relate to that. Some of you right now will be able to relate to that. Others of you won't be able to. Life is good. But then God does something so gracious and kind. He breaks the peace for him. He breaks the peace. Now, what is he doing as he breaks the peace for him? He is trying to wake him up to a true reality. Sometimes God does this for us. Now, for Nebuchadnezzar, it's a dream. For us, it may be, we just live in a world that is broken, and it reminds you this is not heaven. It may be you're out and you're watching a sunset, or you're seeing one of those comets and you go, wow, you see the northern lights. Did anyone see the northern lights from Chroma around here? Yes. Where did you? Anyway, I'm not going to say where you saw it from. But you see this moment of absolute beauty, and it takes you out of yourself, and you think there must be something more, or it may be illness. There's something that the Lord brings to wake you up to him and eternal realities. If that's you and you're here today, we're so blessed to have you with us. Well, look, God graciously gives Nezer, verse 4, a dream, and it disturbs him. And he's lying in his bed, verse 5, and these images and visions passed through my mind and terrified me. And so he gets the wise man. They're the people who should know a little bit about dreams, and he tells them the dream. And they say, we've got no idea what it means. And so he goes to the man who can. He goes to the man who's already proved himself to be faithful, Daniel, who he describes in verse 8 as the man who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. No, Nezer, it's not the spirit of the holy gods. He has the spirit of the one true God. And so Daniel, the dream fixer, with God's help, tells him the dream. And there's 2 elements to this dream. There's glory and there's humiliation. Glory and humiliation. And so we're going to look at both the dream and the interpretation. And the first point is this. There we go. There's glory, okay? Nebuchadnezzar, do you realize how glorious your kingdom is? Just have a look, verses 10 to 12. These are the visions I had while lying there in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it, the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in the branches. From it, every creature was fed. And again, Daniel gives this summary of this dream in 20 and 21. But what is the punchline of this glorious tree? Verse 22, you, your majesty, are that tree. You've become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and dominion extends to the distant parts of the earth. You see, what we meet with Nebuchadnezzar at this point in his reign is not just a dictator. I think he's a benevolent ruler. And actually, what has grown underneath his rule is both magnificent and glorious. And it's a place that, if you imagine you come to a tree, and trees, there is something beautiful about a big old tree. Isn't there? Something life-giving? Maybe that's just me. But you come to a big old tree, like a really big tree, and you're looking up, and it reaches up and up and up and up, and it's a little bit breathtaking. That is Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And you imagine people who lived in Babylon would have been proud of their city. They would have loved, we're Babylonians. When I first came to Norwich, I came to be interviewed for the job here. And one of the things that came over from people who I was chatting to again and again, interview committee and people in the church, they love Norwich. Norwich is a very fine city, and it's a particularly fine city as compared to that absolute dump that's known as Ipswich. And we all know the tractor boys are going to be relegated. But they love the city. It's a beautiful city. Hear, hear. There was almost an amen for at home. There was an amen. Babylon. It's beautiful. The farms are producing the most amazing food. There's loads of it. Now, I don't know. I doubt there's not going to be a welfare state, but under Nebuchadnezzar's leadership, the economy is booming, people's businesses are working, lives are flourishing. Yes, he's called to repent of some of his behavior, but generally there's enough food for people to eat. That image of the animals coming under the shade of this tree, and if you imagine the heat there in the Middle East, and the beauty of just being in a place where it's cool and calm. And that's what it's like living in the kingdom. You can put down roots. You can grow your lives together. You can flourish. See, all that has happened under Nebuchadnezzar. In the workplace, I don't know if you've worked in a work environment where it's really working, where the boss is working well and you as a team are working well and things are flourishing and working. We know what it's like to be in a workplace where your boss is a nightmare and everyone's squabbling and every day is a headache and you don't want to be here. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon is the first of those two. Don't you want a country that works like that? Yeah. Don't you want to be in a king? Don't you want to make your home in Babylon? Under Nebuchadnezzar's rule, that's what's happened. Now look, it's a side point. It's not a big point. In God's common grace, good leadership is not a necessary evil. It enables a lot of life to flourish. It's a side point. But if you like, there is the glory, but then there is a second point, because in this dream, there is humiliation. There's humiliation. As Nebuchadnezzar is warned, God's axe will fall on you. You see, Daniel doesn't just have good news to share. I bet you he just wished, just the first half. there he is talking to Nebuchadnezzar, the man who his favorite song is I'm a fire starter. He's seen what's happened the week before as people who have stood up to him have been thrown into a fiery furnace. And he's remarkably nervous. Verse 19, he's perplexed, Daniel. His thoughts terrify him. The king reassures him, just tell me. Verse 19, actually, what does he say? My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. Now, I don't think Daniel's just sort of flowering it up there. I think he genuinely likes Nezer by this point. But what he's about to express to Nezer is that he's about to experience a truth of reality in a world where God reigns. In the words of Proverbs, pride comes before a fall. At the heart of this glorious kingdom is a man who genuinely believes all that has happened is because of him apart from God. Not because of God, not because of all the gifts that God has given him and the opportunities. No. This has happened because of me. And here's the thing, as you set yourself up as an adversary to God, he may let that go on for a while, but there will always be a point where he will hold you to account. It may be in this life, pride becomes before a fall. It may be when we meet him beyond death on the judgment day, where he hold us to account for living a life having ignored him proudly, thinking we can do it on our own. You see, Nezer's heart, building this nation, it's about him, it's about his glory. The human pride that drives that drives so much of us in our own little kingdoms. Maybe in the family, maybe in the course, maybe in the workplace, in the business. And if we think, I'm setting this up and it's all under my own steam and it's all about me, pride comes before a fall. And so Nezer has this to confront him with. Have a look at verse 23. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him. Daniel says, look, Nezer, this dream says there's going to be chop, chop, then chew, chew. The tree will have the divine chainsaw taken to it, and then the one who gave shelter to the beasts of the field will himself become a beast in the field for a period of time. Now, look, that is a prophecy specifically for Nezer. It is not to us. Not in the same way. Until there is a change of heart. And what's the change of heart? Verse 26. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that the kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge what? That heaven rules. That heaven rules. Now Daniel's kind to him, verse 27. He issues a call to repent. Look at him. Therefore, your majesty, most powerful man in all the world, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sin. Repent by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that your prosperity will continue. He says, own the way you've been living. Own the implications of that in your mind. Change your mind. I was wrong. Change your heart. I need to change your life. Things need to change. Are you going to humble yourself or be humiliated? Nezer, you are glorious, but there is a humbling to come. What are you going to do about it? There's the dream. There's the interpretation. And then we meet the fulfillment. Verses 29 onwards. This is the third point, the humiliation, the fulfillment. Just look at verse 29. 12 months later. 12 months later. Now, again, it's just worth reflecting on God's kindness to Nebuchadnezzar. He has been knocking on his door for years and years and years. He's had 2 dramatic visions that have been revealed to him with a call to respond. He has watched, he's thrown 3 faithful Hebrew Yahweh worshippers into the flames to see them come out alive. He's had the persistent witness of Daniel and his mates who have been reliable workers that he's been able to trust. They've always been kind. Their persistent, different life. God's been kind to him, kind to him, kind to him. And now he's given him an extra 12 months to sort things out. And look at the words that come out of his lips. Look at this, verse 12. He is walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And I don't know, in your mind's eye, this city is beautiful. Do you know, on the outer walls, apparently they were as thick. They were like the sort of the concourse on top of the outer walls were as wide that you could have had a 4-horse chariot charging along it. That's just the outer wall. He's there in the palace. He's looking out at it. The sun's glistening over everything. And look at the words, verse 30. Is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence? By whose power? My mighty power. And for the glory of who? My majesty. And as those words of pride, as he's there going, speaking to himself, wow, I'm awesome. Look how special I am. Look at the words, verse 31. As the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals and will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass until you acknowledge the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth. He gives them to anyone he wishes. And immediately what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people. He ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched with dew from heaven until his hair grew like feathers of an eagle and nails like claws of a bird. He is gone. Mentally, he has gone. There are so many things in life we try and hold on to, but if your mind goes, then there's not much you can do about it. And 7 sessions could be 7 seasons, it could be 7 years. He is not a well man. He is a human who acts like a beast. And that is not a choice. It's a mental illness. The doctors, do you know there is a condition? It's a mental illness. It's called boathropy. Boathropy, and it's a human being believing they are a bovine, an ox or a cow. They genuinely believe it. It is a condition. And here is this mighty, glorious, powerful king having all his power and majesty and dignity stripped away from him. He was the king. He was the top of the tree. He was the top of the tree, and now he is grazing on hands and knees underneath the tree. The proud man has been humbled. You know, pride is such an easy thing. It's such a foolish thing. It's such a thing that we all fall into so easily. C.S. Lewis, who is an English academic, wrote the Narnia novels. Some of you will know that. He put pride like this: a proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you look down, you cannot see something that is above you. As we're so consumed with ourselves and our standing, as we look at other people and look down, 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 or maybe we look at them and think they're doing better than us and our pride is dented, or we look down on them and think, well, I'm so much better at that than them. I can throw a rugby ball better than them, or whatever it may be. It stops us from looking up and comparing ourselves to the creator of heaven and earth, who has gives us life and breath and the next heartbeat and everything. People who make it to the top, this is a phrase that people will say about them. People often say success is harder to manage than failure. As you look at human history and reflect on the kingdoms and the demise of empires, and there's a poet, Carl Sandburg, he puts it like this: the earth and history is strewn with the burst bladders of the puffed up. The earth is strewn with the burst bladders of the puffed up. And here is Nezer, and he's refused to humble himself. He's refused to acknowledge himself as a creature rather than the creator. And this is the point where you expect the story to stop, right? There he is. He thinks grass is a tasty meal. This man who has gone and done wicked things to the people of God and destroyed lots of nations around him. Okay, he's produced a pretty impressive kingdom. This is where he gets his comeuppance. Leave him as a beast. And yet here's the thing. God, in his kindness, extends mercy and grace to this man who doesn't deserve it, because that is what God is like. That is how God works. He extends grace to the humble. He extends mercy to the broken. And in a divine moment of mercy, he comes to his senses. Verse 34, look what happens. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes where? Not looking downwards or across, he looks upwards. I raised my eyes towards heaven. My sanity was restored. And then I praised the Most High, who I honored and glorified, him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does what he pleases. With the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth, he can hold. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" And what happens to him as he is being humbled? He looks to the heavens and he is kind of glorified. Look what happens, verse 36. At the same time, my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me. For the glory of the kingdom, my advisors and nobles sought me out. I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. I mean, it's amazing. Just imagine if our prime minister, for 4 weeks, not 7 seasons or 7 years, for 4 weeks, kind of lost it. The bovine thing hit him. And rather than sleeping in 10 Downing Street, he slept outside and he was on all fours and he was mooing like a cow and trying to eat weeds. And imagine he snapped back into a sane position. Do you think we'd let him back into number 10 to rule? Do you think we'd tolerate that sort of weakness? Well, amazingly, in God's kindness, Nezer is not just back, it's not just humiliation, but it is glorification. And his kingdom is even more glorious after. Now look, big thing. Big thing. So what do we see? It was a proclamation of glory or humiliation. He experiences humiliation and he's restored to glory. What is God teaching us? We're thinking about how do you make home in Babylon without becoming a Babylonian? How do you live in this world without becoming conformed to the likeness of the priorities of this world? And the main thing that is repeated in this is kind of obvious, but look at it. Look at it's the message of the watcher, verse 26. In fact, verse 17. Have a look at verse 17. What does he say? The decision is announced by the messengers, the Holy One, declare this verdict so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes and sets over them the lowliest of people. Look at verse 26. The command to leave the slums will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. And what does Nebuchadnezzar acknowledge? In verse 34 and 35, heaven rules. His dominion is eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. It's again and again and again. And one of the things that God is bringing to the fore for us is something about his sovereignty. He is the king over every king. God is the king over every king. He reigns everywhere at all time, in every place, in every circumstance. Every glorious kingdom, he set them up. Every terrible, failing kingdom, he set them up. Every good king and government, he set them up. Every wicked king and government, he set them up. He is the king over every king. And you know, that is one of the most transforming truths for us in the West. We're in a democratic state. We can write to our MPs about laws being passed. There is a goodness to that. But how do you keep going? Maybe it's a government you don't like. Maybe it's a government you do like. How do you keep going? Well, ultimately, you know he's the king over this king, and his kingdom is the one that will run forever. It's just temporary. You know, there's an election in America, democracy again. Whoever is elected is the person God wants there. It may not be the person you want there. It may be that God is bringing good through the person who is elected, or chaos in judgment with a bigger purpose for the world to come. But he's sovereign. It's first thing, first big thing, first bit of application. That's a true general point, but there is a more personal point to this chapter. I don't know whether you noticed, this chapter is written differently to what we've read in Daniel so far. Did you clock that? Okay, so how is it written differently? Who is addressing us? Have a look at verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and people of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you. Look at verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home. Verse 5, I had a dream. Verse 8, finally Daniel came into my presence. Verse 13, I saw in visions. I saw them. See, what are we getting in chapter 4? Nebuchadnezzar is telling us his story. Now, maybe this letter literally went out to all the nations. It sounds like it. And Daniel's gone, I'm going to stick that in my book. Maybe Daniel transcribed it. But here's the thing that's remarkable about it, is what this king tells us. I was in a secondhand bookstore yesterday, and I almost picked up this biography, and I regret I didn't. It was a biography of Ryan Giggs. Now, for some of you, you'll know who he is. He was a Welsh footballer. Astonishing player, played for Manchester United, played for years and years and years. On the pitch, he was amazing. Off the pitch, in his family life, he was an utter disgrace. Now, in this biography, what are you going to hear a lot about? His football. What are you not going to hear about? The disgrace at home. Here's Nebuchadnezzar, and what does he reveal to you in his biography bit? Okay, the kings of Babylon, what do you think they're going to want to share with the world? They want to share, we beat this person up, and then I built this, and then I did this. They are not going to want to tell you about the time they were a cow in the field. And yet he does. Why? I think it's this. He's willing to show his complete humiliation to the world because he wants them to find the king that he has met. Do you remember the words on his lips? Do you remember the words on his lips? Verse 30, what are they? Is this not great Babylon I have built? by my mighty power for the glory of my majesty. That was what Nebuchadnezzar used to be. But look at who he is in verse 2. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders the Most High God has performed for who? Verse 2, for who? For me. Look at how he finishes. Who is the king who deserves all the glory? Verse 34, then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases. Nebuchadnezzar has come to know the king who is above every king, the king who places every king. And I think he's come to trust him. What does he want you to do? Be warned of pride that sets your life apart from the living God and the King he has sent. Look at the end of verse 37. Those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. Put God in his right place in your life. But I think I want to push it even further than that. I think he's trying to offer us hope for those who are in utterly humiliated states. If you're in the deepest of holes right now, you're facing the reality of a deep and painful fall. He knows there is transforming and utterly undeserved grace for all of those who will lift their eyes from down here up to him. See, this king's story tells us of the ultimate king's story. There's another king, King Jesus. He was the one who was humbled. He left the glory of heaven, the kingdom that works perfectly in an even more perfect way than Babylon did. He left the glory of heaven and he was humbled, not because of his pride, but because of his passion for God's glory and to rescue proud people. He, Jesus, was humiliated by the people who he had made as they put him on a cross. But in that moment, he is punished and judged for all the pride and selfishness and sin that we have. And the one who was humbled to the grave was raised and is seated at the right hand of the Father to an even greater glory. See, when Jesus talks about his kingdom, Mark 4, he talks about it as a tree that grows, and the birds make shelter. And that is a glorious kingdom where the axe will never fall. Because he is a king who will never fail. There will never be a case where the earth will be strewn with the burst bubble bladder of the puffed up, because Jesus is the perfect, humble king who will never fail. He will never leave us. And I just wonder, are you part of that kingdom? And if you've never trusted Christ, he's saying, I'll take your sin. I want you to make you part of this kingdom that will last forever. Come to me. But for so many of us, we are, and we forget the glory. And in pride, we think our lives are all about ourselves. And he says, remember who's the king above every king. Trust him.